Hi friends, and welcome to part 7 of my 100 book challenge. Today I'm going to be discussing books 61 to 70. So the first book that I read was Fairest by Marissa Meyer, which is kind of like book 3.5 in the Lunar Chronicles series. So it's not quite a continuation of the main character's story. It's sort of a prequel of Queen Lavanna and how she got to be the way that she is, aka Queen Bitch of Evil herself. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was a really cool look into what makes her so evil, and it was fun getting to read about how she justified everything in her head, like all of the crazy batshit evil stuff that she does in her head. It's just like, yes, this makes sense, this is logical. So I like that kind of villain perspective where, like, to them they're not evil, they're just doing what makes sense to them. So I think she's a really well thought out bad guy in that respect. So if you're a fan of the Lunar Chronicles like I am, I would highly recommend you read this if you haven't already. It's definitely a great addition to the series. The next book I read was A Test of Wills by Charles Todd, which is the first in the Inspector Ian Rutledge series. So this book is not something I would normally pick up, but I actually read it because my mom was reading it at the time, and I wanted to just try reading something that she reads just to see if we have similar taste. I enjoyed it, but it's not really the kind of thing that I generally reach for. So it's a British detective murder mystery story set right after World War I. So our Detective Inspector Ian Rutledge has just come back from the war, and he's very traumatized. He's essentially got PTSD to the point where he's actually invented this character in his head, kind of a ghost of a soldier who, in his mind, died because of him. It's not like he actively killed him, but he feels responsible for the soldier's death. So this soldier kind of haunts him and is always saying stuff in his ear. Meanwhile, he comes to the small town where a man has been murdered, and he goes around interviewing all of the various suspects, trying to figure out who done it. I liked the PTSD and the sort of internal struggle that the detective goes through. I think I definitely would check out the next book in the series, but maybe not for a little while, just because it was a little bit long and not the kind of thing I typically reach for, so I'm good just like giving myself a little break before moving on to the next book in the series. And I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think I've mentioned before that I just love reading books about a big cast of characters who come from different backgrounds, who all kind of are forced to work together and interact with each other, and this book did not disappoint. It's essentially a heist story of 6 different characters who all have to break into this super strong fortress and try to rescue this guy that's being held hostage. He has the power to create this kind of like super formula to make all the people who wield magic in this world even stronger and more powerful, to the point where they pretty much self-combust because they overdose on the drug. And my favorite character was obviously Kaz. I just loved him so much. It's, you know, the gloves, the cane, the injury, the black hair, the taking no shit from anybody. It's just very like chef's kiss of a character. So well done. And I also loved Inej, like every scene with the two of them together. Just adorable. And also Jesper. Was that his name? Jess or Jesper? I think that was his name. Loved his character a lot. Honestly, they're all great, the whole batch. The only one that I didn't love was the Nordic guy. Like the soldier guy, whatever his name was. Matthew? Was that his name? I don't know. I'll put it here. I can't remember what his name was, but he was my least favorite of the bunch. He was just a little bit of a stick in the mud. Yeah, loved this book. I read the second one shortly after. Didn't like it quite as much, but I'll talk about it in a later video. The third book I read was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. I think I am. This is the second book in the Wayward children's series, and it follows the 2 twins, Jack and Jill, that we met in the first book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's essentially the story of how Jack and Jill first found their fantasy world, which is sort of a Frankenstein, Dracula, dark, gloomy, stormy, magical world that they call the Moor. And I really liked Jack's character a lot. Jill, I mean, wasn't really a fan of Jill, but I appreciate her acting as a counterpoint to Jack. And it was just a beautiful, magical, vibrant, intense story. Again, if you like Alice in Wonderland and you like fantasy, dark fantasy retellings, I feel like you'd really enjoy this series. Next, I read Obsidio by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff, which is the final book in the Illuminae Files series. It took me so long to get around to reading this, which is not because I didn't want to finish the series. It was more just that I was waiting for the right time to be inspired to read a science fiction book that was that big, because the things are like this big, like they are no small task to get through, but also it's just so much fun to read these books that I'm really, really glad I eventually picked it up and decided to finish the series. I really thought it was the perfect end to the series and everything I could have hoped for. I do think it's the least strong of the three. In my head, it goes first, second, third in order of how good they are. But honestly, they're all top tier. The whole series is just fantastic. It's written in an epistolary format, which means it's like a collection of notes and correspondence and transcripts from video recordings and audio and things like that. But the whole series is kind of a sci-fi, futuristic, good against evil, revenge, saving the world. Not so much saving the world, but like, you know, spaceships and fighting in space and AI and teenage love stories, and it just has so many good things in it, and I really, really love this series, and I love Kristoff so much, and I'm sure Amie Kaufman too. I haven't read anything that's just by her, but like I love her too. Finally, I finished Winter by Marissa Meyer, the final book in the Lunar Chronicles series, and wow, what a ride this was. Holy cow. Firstly, Winter was amazing. I loved her a lot. Honestly, I love all four like princesses in this series. I think they're all fantastic and so strong for different reasons. Winter was so sweet and compassionate, and I love how hard she fought to do the right thing and protect the people that she cared about despite the things she was going through. This book, I think, was a really, really strong ending for the series. My biggest complaint was regarding how things ended with Wolf. So just a spoiler alert, skip ahead to the next book if you haven't read it yet, but like they did Wolf dirty and I'm really pissed off about it. Like I don't know, it's just after everything he had been through, to have his like body mutilated even further, and then he just gets no resolve. He's just forced to live the rest of his life that way. I mean, it just seems unfair to him and all of the other people like him, all of the other Lunars who were stolen from their homes as children and then mutilated just for Queen Levana's purposes, that they don't get any sort of resolve from that. Is just makes me really mad. I mean, they have the technology to create these creatures, but they don't have the technology to undo it. That just seems a little like lazy writing to me. It's like, I'm sure they could have figured out some way to fix it. It just makes me mad. Anyways, I guess as long as Wolf is happy with it, that's the most important thing. I don't really feel like I got a strong perspective from Wolf at the end of the book, whether he was okay with it or not, because we get the scene mainly from Scarlett's perspective, and it's like, sure, it's great Scarlett's okay with it, but like Wolf is the one who has to live with it. And I don't know, it just made me really mad that they couldn't like reverse those changes a little bit, because now like wherever he goes for the rest of his life, people are gonna look and see and be reminded of like all of the, you know, brainwashed wolves who went through and were killing people and stuff, and it's unfair to him, and my baby deserves better, and I'm mad about it. Anyways, aside from that, it was a 5-star book. Book number 7 on this list is The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I felt like it was really appropriate at the time because he does talk about the tipping point of epidemics in this book, and I was a little like, haha, that's a little like too relatable for the time period. Basically, the book talks about all of the different factors that lead to something becoming an epidemic, and he doesn't just mean it in like a disease epidemic, but like, you know, any sort of epidemic that spreads like something that's popular or a piece of knowledge or a trend, any kind of epidemic that happens throughout the world. He talks about the different factors that contribute to something rising, peaking, and then eventually the tipping point where it tips into that, you know, epidemic phase of becoming widespread. And he uses a few different examples like sports shoes, fashion trends, computer items, car accessories, different things like that. I've enjoyed every Malcolm Gladwell book I've read so far, so if you like his work or you want to branch into entertaining nonfiction, so have some fun but also learn a little bit about the world, this is a great book. The next book I read was dun, 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 Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Look at this beastie. Look how thick it is. It's a chunker. I loved this a lot. I gave it 5 stars on my Goodreads, but technically it's a 4.5 for me just because I had a little bit of trouble getting into the beginning of the book. There's a lot of characters that get thrown at you all at once, and it's just a little bit like, slow down, Cassie, like let me take a minute to absorb. But it's centered around the children of the characters from the Clockwork Angel trilogy, which is my favorite piece of Cassandra Clare's work. So good. It's on my top 10 favorite book series of all time. Definitely recommend you go check that out first before diving into this, because it does reference those characters and past events specifically. So I feel like you're going to be spoiling it a little bit if you read this one first. So if you haven't read that series, just go pick it up and then you can dive into this one. So again, it centers around the children of Tessa and Will, as well as all of their friends' children, and then we have a couple new characters as well. We have Cordelia Carstairs and her brother Alistair. Is it Alistair or Alistair? Because Alistair Carstairs, I just realized, is a little funky sounding. We'll never know. It'll remain a mystery forever. But yeah, once I figured out who all the children were and did a little bit of a who's who, I was able to just really dive into the story, and I loved it. I won't give away too much of the plot because if you're not aware of who Cassandra Clare is or what the Shadowhunter series is by now, have you been living under a rock? And please, can you pop on out of that and get on board the Fun Express, aka the author Cassandra Clare, because she is fantastic. If you've never read any of her works, I would recommend starting off with the Clockwork Angel series because I think it is her strongest piece. But yeah, I did really enjoy this, and I'm super excited for the next book in the series. And finally, the last book on this list is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and this was such a powerhouse of a book and a trilogy. I loved it so much. I added it to my top 10 of 2020 because I just thought it was so fantastic, and I like consumed it and just immediately had to go out and read the second and third books as well because it was just such a fantastic series. So the book is set around this character Stevie Bell, who has been obsessed her whole life with the mystery of Ellingham Academy. So back in the 20s, this famous billionaire, Mr. Ellingham, founded this academy out in the forest for special gifted children, and it was opulent and no expense spared and just highly selective about who they let into the school. So he builds this school, invites children to come and learn, and then one of the children gets murdered. On the same night, Mr. Ellingham's young daughter is kidnapped, and her name is Alice. Nobody ever figures out who the murderer is, and Alice is never found. His wife is also found dead, so she gets murdered as well. So it's like a double murder and a kidnapping. And it's remained this huge mystery throughout history. Been a mystery throughout history. And so Stevie is obsessed with this mystery, and she has also obsessed with detectives. She really admires Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and has read all of those books, and she wants to be a detective when she grows up. So she submits an application to come to Ellingham School and says, I want to solve the mystery of the murder kidnapping. And of course she gets invited to come to the school, and she meets this amazing, wonderful, diverse cast of characters. I think this is really where the book shines, is the kind of representation that it has, as well as just it being an awesome, enthralling mystery. But firstly, Stevie has anxiety, and I think the author did a really good job of showing that anxiety and talking about coping mechanisms and the kind of pills she takes, and it's just represented really well. And she also has this amazing cast of friends. So Janelle, firstly, is a frickin' rock star. So she's a black lesbian robotics engineer, and she wears dresses that her perfume matches the fruit that's on her dresses, and I just love that so much. She's such a cool character. Like, every time I read her, I was just like, damn, like, I'm so impressed with her. Like, if she doesn't get into Harvard or something, I'd be shocked. And then she ends up dating, later on in the series, she dates a non-binary person with they them pronouns, and I just love how the pronouns were just slid into the book. Like, it was just, I don't have to tell you about this, you should know. I'm using they them pronouns and you should just know what that is. And it just felt really inclusive, and like it had been normalized so perfectly within the book that I just really appreciated that. And then her other friend Nate is like just always grumpy. He's an author and he's always mad because he doesn't want to write his book. And I just really, there's a line that I really like in the book that says something like, he was always like a rain cloud, but you know, everybody needs a little rain in their life. I don't know, just the way she said it, it's just such a great quote. Anyways, I really like the dynamic of those three main friends. And then she also has a love interest, and there's a couple other characters in the dorm where she lives. And the book kind of starts off with one of these characters mysteriously being found dead, and everybody's trying to figure out if it's a suicide or if he's been murdered. So now we have a modern day present murder mystery mixed in with Stevie trying to figure out the murder mystery of the past at Ellingham Academy, and it's just so good. It's so juicy. I loved this story so much. Highly recommend if you're into murder mysteries. Plus, it's rare to see one in the YA genre, so I really appreciated that as well. Well, that is all our 10 books. Thank you so much for watching. We are really powering through the series here. We have 3 more parts to go after this, and I'm super excited to tell you about the rest of the books that I read. Bye.